What up, people? This is Noble. Another episode of the Lost Explorer thingamabopper. We still haven't figured out what it is. This is still season 0, the test season. And I've been talking about some nerdy shit with a lot of prolific, smart intellectuals. Some of you remember them as glass explorers or glass holes. I refer to them as my friends, and you better not call them glass holes because I'll come at you really hard. No, seriously, as you probably have followed, if you've seen an episode of this thing that I'm doing, is that we had a community of people who chose to use Google Glass, the guinea pigs that chose to wear what some of you might call a horrific face computer and scare everybody around our locales. And I came to find these early adopters to be some of the smartest people I'd ever met. Developers, artists, IT people, just smart people that we got into so many philosophical conversations. And Google decided, we're not going to do Glass Explorers no more. And the community just sort of dispersed. So I'm doing a whole, Pokemon thing, better catch them all kind of thing, catch all the glass holes. A new glass hole appeared. And then I just sort of ring them in and I just badger them about a topic. The topic can be about connected cars. It can be about, IoT generally. It could be about, wearables. It could be about anything that I'm passionate about or what, things that I've talked about in the past. So without further ado, this is what I like to, this guest is who I like to call the glass hole ambassador or chief glass hole in charge. And that person comes to us from Florida, and that is Chris Jenkins. Chris, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Noble. Glad to be here.
So I hope I represented you well in that intro. It was I was making it up as I was going ahead.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. Although I have to say, I did create the original glass hole T-shirts, so I'm totally willing to rep.
Awesome.
I'm fine with that.
Awesome. And when you repped glass, I assume you're not wearing it now, so you don't wear it regularly. What color glass did you choose?
Oh, I went between charcoal and shale.
Got it.
I always keep it in the black and gray range because
it matches with everything else. Yeah, I'm the same way. I try to go bold just because I'm a darker skinned brother. And so I had the cotton, they call it the white one. And that was just too hey, look at me. I'm screaming for attention. So I kind of shied away.
If I had your complexion, I'd be rocking the tangerine personally.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for me.
Yeah, that was that and the blue one, whatever, cobalt or what they called it, sky. Sky, that and the tangerine was just way too much. I'd rather I went all out with the white and I just retreated back with the black, the shale. The charcoal.
See, I could totally imagine T-Pain in a tangerine suit wearing tangerine glass.
Yeah, that's because, he's a well-known rapper and he also probably has a couple guns next to him. And so I'm not going to...
With tangerine hilts.
Exactly. So I'm not going to question his, MO. However, I probably walk around town with shale glasses and get beat up just because, I should know better. So anyway, thank you for joining.
For the record, I do still use my Google Glass pretty aggressively, but the thing is, for me, it ended up becoming, it was great for point of view photography and videography, but the battery life just didn't really support every day, all day wearing,
Right. Actually, that's going to be how I was going to lead into this. So thanks for beautiful segue. We found out very early that, it was a great product. I think Google single-handedly revived an industry that had a lot of promise that was in the labs. But we quickly found out that in order to do what that famous Google Glass advertisement spot, that little clip that they, distributed on YouTube and whatever, in order to sort of do, hangouts on air and just sort of connected video and have all that stuff. You have to sacrifice burning your face off because the device got very hot, or just, 5 minutes, if you're lucky, of battery life. The price performance of the hardware wasn't there. So, yeah.
Definitely an experimental product.
Yeah. And it wasn't advertised as that. It was kind of advertised as that, but the media sort of took it and ran with it as a finished product that, only certain people could get. So we're not going to get into that, though. Today we're just going to generally talk about the VR and AR industry. And I'm going to pose a question, and like we've been doing with all these other episodes, which is going to dominate the market, VR or AR. We know that right now, VR is back with a vengeance. VR is like a cat, right? It's got like 9 lives. I think we're on its like 6th life. It's been dead. It comes back. It goes into the academics. It dies again, and then 360 videos come out, and then we call that VR. What is VR to you, Chris?
I played my first VR video game when I was 14. It was in the mall, and you had to pay like $10 for 3 minutes. And you got up into the little like ring, and it had a little like multi-directional trackpad that you could walk on, and it had this super low resolution, like less than 8-bit display, and you could basically throw grenades at other players, and it just had a terrible aiming, terrible graphics, terrible experience, and it was the best thing of my life.
$10?
I spent like $50 on it.
Holy! They were raking it in. I'm in the wrong industry. And
literally, it was like $10 for 3-minute games, and I was just on it. I thought it was so cool. So I mean, for me, that's VR has been that for a long time. It's a fully immersive experience, and all of the new VR we see, it's just basically better and better resolution and better performance of that same sort of concept. This immersive, a movie or an immersive game or something along that line, but that the immersive property pretty much is the reason why I think that's always going to remain just sort of a high-end niche. For me, AR is where, or what they call mixed reality is where things really start to get to the mass appeal level, because you start replacing, your cell phone essentially with something that's really fully environmentally aware, and it's with you all the time, and you wear it all day, every day. Same way you carry your phone around. And
what's AR to you technically then? So VR, you've had a lot of history with. What does AR mean to you? What's your history with?
The biggest difference for me is that it's AR is pass-through overlays on your existing environment. So essentially, you've got a clear lens with some sort of a projection system that allows all of the digital information to not just overlay your environment, but also react to it, be aware of it. It's an environmentally aware system that provides digital enhancement.
That's pretty cool. And lately, at least when Google Glass launched, or before Google Glass launched, I was under the impression that it was true AR. It was like, spatially aware. I was expecting way too much for the form factor and the capabilities that actually did launch. And so industry experts and marketing people have been sort of classifying AR a little bit in interesting ways. I've heard light AR for Google Glass and Vuzix type things, true AR capability for, say, Epson and Movera from a couple of years ago, and more, contextual and spatially aware, but not with actual 3D objects like you would see in a virtual space overlaid. And then you've got mixed reality that can do everything, actually, which I don't really buy that. I think it's marketing jargon to say mixed reality. It's either AR or it's not, right? But I do get the whole HoloLens paradigm, the whole, MetaVision. I don't know whether you saw that TED Talk that I can never pronounce the CEO of Meta's name. And it's actually not that complicated. But yeah, I tend to sort of understand what they're trying to do. Like what's your take on the different flavors of AR, and what do you think is going to?
I mean, we laughed when Google Glass came out, and we had seemingly a bunch of clueless TV reporters all trying to sort of look through the lens. But I mean, I don't really find that surprising looking back now, because I think that that's part of what wasn't clear about the differences between those kinds of products. This was a lens that was there to sort of look up and get information from, not to view the world through.
Right.
To me, that's the single biggest difference. I mean, AR should work the same way that regular glasses do, with with data that cleanly overlays. If you've got informational stuff like the Google Glass type stuff, maybe it's posted sort of out near the peripherals of your vision, but the real promise of AR is that ability to get digital feedback from the environment that you're looking around at,
Right. Yeah, and I think what Microsoft and some of these newer players, Cast AR, Leap, is it Leap Motion? No, Magic Leap, and others are trying to do, and hopefully, I think Apple or Google eventually will get into that. What they're trying to do is they're trying to take the more mature paradigm, which is VR, and they're trying to bring a lot of the benefits of VR into an overlay, like you said, an environment where you can sort of overlay virtual objects within real reality. And I think that's really, really compelling, especially when you include, depth of field, parallax, the ability to sort of have cameras sort of scan your environment and actually use the environment effectively, overlay a mesh over your couch and turn that into a mountainside, stuff like that.
I mean, I think we've seen a lot of moves clearly from Google, and I really am kind of waiting to see how Apple comes into this space, because I know they've got to eventually. They just will. And we all know that, when Apple gets involved in a market space, it sometimes adds a legitimacy to that space that isn't there with some of the other players, because people assume that if Apple's decided to get on board, then it must be real,
Right.
But I think Google's already made a $500 million investment in Magic Leap, and Ventures led a couple of rounds. They're up to a little over $1.5 billion in venture capital without releasing a consumer product at all. I think that goes to show that the technology that they are working on there is impressive enough that it's got people 10 figures interested.
Yeah, I was on a show on the Twit This Week in Tech a couple of weeks ago, and the host, Leo Laporte, asked if Magic Leap was the next, what is I've just blanked, the healthcare company that, Theranos.
Right. The
Theranos, where you're pumping billions of dollars, literally billions of dollars in the case of Magic Leap, into a technology that hasn't been yet proven, right?
I think that, and that might be something for Roni Abovitz, the CEO of Magic Leap, to kind of address himself. They are in such a space, and he's been given so much freedom because of the technology that they've showed to date. I think that he's at risk of maybe falling into the trap of, well, we were going to do this consumer product 1.0, but let's put this feature in, let's put this feature in, let's put this feature in,
Yeah. So let's take a step back and sort of look at the lay of the land, the players in the game right now. And what I want to do is I want to first sort of give you what I think, my interpretation of the various philosophies and their approaches in the world of mixed reality anyway. And I'll leave it to you to sort of, throw in your opinion as to what is the best strategy to get to mass market, right? So you've got Microsoft, first player in the game, with an impressive piece of tech, right? HoloLens, it's expensive, developer version, it is untethered, right? For being untethered, there's some trade-offs. So you've got a smaller field of view. Some people argue how large is enough. But obviously true mixed reality or augmented reality, you want as large a field of view as possible. But for the form factor and the technology we have today, small field of view. All right, we get it. But it's untethered, right? And it's a Windows 10 single purpose PC within your field of view, and it does a lot of impressive stuff with infrared and sensors and other sensors to help place you in a virtual yet real space, an actual space. So that's their philosophy. Cast AR is more projection, and MetaVision is almost the same. Cast AR right now, what I understand their technology is, they're tethered, but they want to sort of go smaller form factor with a clip-on piece on glasses that allows you to sort of play chess on a table that, where the chess sets aren't really there. So you're just moving virtual chess objects or whatever games, like kind of like a Star Wars, board game or something like that. MetaVision is tethered, at least the version that is out on the market. Their strategy is almost similar to Microsoft's, just that the approaches to the hardware is different, right? So let's, create an operating system, turn an operating system into a virtual space. So basically taking the concept of, real life objects that people can collaborate with in real time, as long as everyone has the glasses and you have the devices. I notice I've not mentioned Google yet, because they're a different strategy altogether. Snapchat, at least with and Niantic, at least with the products that they have, yes, they are AR, right? They could be light AR or whatever you want to call it. But Snapchat is more mobile, right? And the strategy is, I think, that, mobile allows you to sort of cross that chasm at the pace of the technology right now. So right now, what that means is, right, not everybody, the price and performance of the hardware is way too high. So why not use the thing in your pocket, the supercomputer, to do what we call AR, right? And do that well, which actually leads perfectly to Google, right? Because you notice they came out with Cardboard to help spur interest in the VR space again, I think. And they, at Google I/O, talked about Daydream. They also have Tango. Notice a common thread with all three reference devices for the Daydream and Tango, and then of course what they've been doing in this space is they're all sort of focused with Cardboard. They're all focused on using your phone as the compute, right? As the doing all the crunching, leveraging cloud where necessary. And obviously you don't have the GPU power of a full-on, Oculus Rift compatible rig that you have to be tethered to, or HTC Vive rig or compatible rig that you have to be tethered to. So I think these are sort of separate. And I know there's a long explanation, but there's a point to all of this. I think these are separate paths. I think Rift and Vive, and at least Rift and Vive, say, all right, VR, makes you motion sick. We have to be able to do more than 60 frames per second. We have to be able to track more than just Z space and motion. We have to be able to not just track your head, but actually track, where you are in this space. Exactly. So we have to be tethered. Google's saying, well, phones are going to get to the point where they're going to outperform the PCs today, or just going to be on par with the PCs today. So let's invest there. Let's go to where the puck is going to be, right? Versus where the puck is. The whole point of this is, these are two, at least with mixed reality, augmented reality, and even VR, they're two paths to getting to, where we want to be. Who do you think is going to win? Like, what strategy is best?
So the biggest problem that Google Glass had, for instance, was the form factor of the actual wearable material. And I think that, despite the fact that I think HoloLens has a great first mover advantage, and I think you're gonna see a pretty wide adoption of HoloLens across the enterprise. I think there's lots of really good use cases for it. But I don't think that the AR or VR devices themselves need to be the ones tasked with the heavy lifting aspect. I mean, you can have a shitty phone from 10 years ago and it'll still play YouTube videos perfectly because all of that stuff is processed and it's just sending a compressed data stream to your viewing device, right? And we're starting to see video games as well the same way, where you can be on a little crappy laptop upstairs, but you have your gaming machine downstairs actually running the game, and you're just streaming the output up to your crappier device wherever you're sitting. I think that model actually works really well. You're not going to build a computer on your face, at least not anytime in the next 5 to 10 years, that's capable of monster gaming PC levels of resolution without it being some sort of Luke Skywalker blast helmet, Right. And people don't want that. That's not what's going to drive adoption. So if we disconnect all the heavy lifting from processing and just have the actual wearable component be purely for display and interaction, that just makes so much more sense to me,
Yeah. Actually, there are a bunch of companies that didn't get any traction, surprisingly, but did exactly what you just described. Say, for example, I think Garmin, they have something called Varia Vision that is actually available for purchase. And then there's another company that actually did the optics for Google, and the name escapes me. Sorry, I haven't had coffee today. Anyway, but they just use the hardware as a relay, as a projector in a sense,
right.
And then just sort of offload all the compute to something else and just stream. And this is nothing new. There are disadvantages for that because, now you have, you have to solve for lag, which is very important when you're talking more mixed reality, more VR type things. But light AR purposes, where you're just overlaying something to infinity, that's fine. Like, it really doesn't matter. So Garmin and others sort of went in that direction, smaller form factor as a benefit, right? And so yeah, but we'll see. I guess we can always.
It's pretty straightforward to do something where if you've got standard mode versus enhanced mode, and enhanced mode uses some sort of hard wire connection. Like I'm about to go into gaming mode, so I pull out this 3.5 mil jack, and it snakes up behind my ear and connects into a little connector on the back of it, and it runs down to my phone, and now I've got a high integrity, low latency connection to the
right. And then Apple will come out to the market and then remove the jack. And then right. All right. So what are some real world examples for let's go with AR, right? And before we even jump into which one is better, let's sort of set that up with, real world examples that you, Chris, think are just going to dominate. So either in the consumer space or in the enterprise space. What do you think?
Well, let's start with the nuts and bolts apps that everyone uses on their phone all the time. One of the things that I loved about Google Glass was the fact that I could quickly, without anyone even noticing, in a split second, I could determine if an email was important, if a phone call was important, if a text message was important, with just basically a glance. So that ability to sort of compartmentalize our active communication streams, that's a big deal to me. The ability to maybe be doing something entirely different. You're sitting in church watching a movie. I'd be more willing to go to Easter Sunday.
Right. That's interesting.
But from an informational perspective, some of the things that even Google kind of hinted at early on that we've never seen yet, but the ability to look down a street, like say, 7th Ave in Ybor City or Bourbon Street on the French Quarter, look down the street and see reservations available, menu options, ratings, reviews, just real time, all sorts of real time data based on a mode,
Right.
If I'm in maps mode, I get this kind of data feedback. If I'm in navigation mode, I get this kind of feedback. All of that to me is the daily consumer use kind of aspect of it,
Like walking down, I love it. Walking down Bourbon Street and saying, "Oh, okay, assistant, pull up some recommendations my friends that Chris might have recommended last week," are probably in that sort of non-computerized natural language. I could just have a conversation with a thing, and it will just show me relevant hopefully not flood my information with AR like we see in the movies and images and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
There's definitely a risk of overload. I think it has to be done well. But we saw right after Google Glass came out, Google acquired a company called Behavio, and they're basically an environmental sensory algorithm company. They're capable of taking lots of disparate sensory information and making extrapolations from it. So, you may not hear everything that's going on in your environment, and you're not paying attention to the changes in the barometer or latent background noises or things along that line. But a behavioral algorithm might be able to hear the faint screech of tires off in a distance and be able to see that Waze is reporting an accident and a bunch of different things, and literally reroute your path in real time from information like milliseconds after something's occurred,
Right.
So that's sort of the ability to have augmented information constantly available to you at all times, adjusting in real time to your environment, to the context of everything in your environment, the weather, who's around you, what group of people you're with, what part of town you're with, and then you being able to guide that by saying, I'm going shopping, I'm looking for something, sort of creating data context for how you expect that device to act.
And it's been my fault. I know the context of this conversation was VR versus AR. And guess what we've been talking about more of?
AR? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Right. So I'm going to take a pivot and say, what are your compelling use cases for VR? Let's talk VR for a second.
Okay, so we've covered what AR is, and on the very, very, very flip side of that, I think that the sort of projector type stuff like Caster and Metavision, they're almost like a party trick. I just don't really see it having that much wide usage. VR, I think, has the potential to be a strong market because it gets all the gamer and movie watcher space.
You really think we're going to be like a Neil Stephenson type Snowcrash or Matrix type situation where we jack in for hours or days and
there's a real reason Neil Stephenson's on the board of Magic Leap. I mean, clearly that's
that is the ultimate goal, where we just jack in and just leave our reality. What do VR heads have against real reality, Chris?
Well, it's not as high resolution.
Oh, really?
For me, it's the idea that like screen size. There's been this big race. I mean, you think about 20 years ago, when we were younger, or teens or kids, depending on how old you are now, we were all on like these 27-inch TVs, 30-inch TVs. Now, almost everybody I know is on a 50 or a 60 or maybe even a 70 if they're balling like that. With VR, screen size becomes a non-issue anymore.
Right.
With a fully immersive VR, it's your total field of view.
Right.
So you get to experience movies and entertainment like gaming, that sort of thing, in a completely immersive way that previously wasn't possible. And I think people don't really, if you haven't done VR yet, even the lower quality VRs that are really kind of available now, like, the Vive and the Gear and those sorts of devices, I'm not blown away by them. But the experience is, it's almost unsettling.
I wouldn't
somewhere else.
I wouldn't even sell cardboard short. Very recently, a couple days ago, Google launched the Bohemian Rhapsody experience. Freddie Mercury's favorite famous hit on cardboard, and before experiencing it myself, this is just a piece of cardboard and your phone and hopefully some headphones. And I gave it to my wife to experience, and it brought her to tears. She had the hands up, she was looking up, looking down, listening to the music, dancing, crying. She was just in the moment for the 3 some odd minute. Actually, it's a very long song, isn't it?
It's like 7.
For however long it takes for that entire experience. And it wasn't just a music video. It wasn't a parlor trick. It was an experience in a medium that she had never experienced before, that I had never experienced before. And so I wouldn't sell just the cardboard experience. I mean, it has its own negative effects and stuff like that. I certainly wouldn't sell it short. So go ahead.
It can be overwhelming when you try out VR for the first time, like current stage high resolution VR. It can really be an overwhelming sensory experience because you do lose track. Me personally, I've got that issue where I get vertigo fairly easily.
Okay.
And that happens constantly for me when I'm using some sort of full, like Oculus Rift. I have to like put my hand on something close by to sort of steady myself because it'll make I lose my balance.
How do you think we solve that? I have my own ideas. How do you think we solve that? Or do you think it's just something that, because they keep promising, the VR heads, like academics, research labs, and even industry keeps promising us, several years ago, 10 years ago, was, we're going to get to the point where computers will solve that problem for us. And then Oculus came out, and we still had that vertigo problem. And they promised the same thing. Yeah, we're in the R&D labs. We're going to make it better. We're going to improve that with, solving for, I forget what Oculus's reasoning for it was, but, they always sort of blame it on the compute, right?
The two things that are missing that I think help enhance that vertigo effect are, B, you typically don't have a body in VR right now.
Right.
And so there's no sense of self, and that's part of what causes, a lack of visual sense of self tends to drive the vertigo effect.
I look down and I don't see my feet.
Right. And when you do that, like your head just wants to keep turning and looking, so you almost just like keep going. And then the other side of it is being responsive to where the eyes themselves look, because you still have this sort of uncanny valley effect that you can move your head around and that's where the camera is. But if you're looking to the left,
no eye tracking,
actually looking to the left,
All right. And so there are some hardware devices that are incorporating eye tracking in there, so I can literally keep my head still and still be able to interact with this virtual environment. And you think that those factors, I've heard people say, add a virtual nose to the to the field of view.
The sense of self is a big deal. That's part of the reason why it's so bad, because it's, I was upstairs on a balcony when I first tried the Oculus.
Oh, no.
And I had to have my hand on the balcony the whole time because just not being able, and it was a cool video. It was like, it was in a skate park and you are on a skateboard and you're following them around, but I couldn't see my feet. I'm just moving up and down these spaces.
Because if you're on a skateboard, you naturally want to look at your feet, right?
Exactly. So that whole sense, it completely removes it makes it so that you're disconnected, and it causes that uncanny valley feeling,
Right. So one way I'm thinking, this is a bit business tip for somebody. I think this is going to be a huge industry. One person is going to come out with this. Some startup is going to come out with this, and everyone's going to copy it. Like our future in VR to solve that problem, if VR becomes the thing that wins, would be to get some sort of drug that you take to help you, fix these sensory issues. So it's basically like you take some sort of, not a psychedelic drug or anything, just something to sort of stabilize you and not make you motion sick. And that same drug, I should mention, would be very useful for those of us that will participate in the impending self-driving car future. If you've ever been in the back of a car and try to read, for some people anyway, me included, you tend to get sick. And what else are you going to do in a self-driving car if you're not driving? You're going to be like looking at a computer, you're going to be looking at a screen or a book or whatever. And there's going to be a lot of motion sickness, both in the self-driving car space and in the VR space naturally. So this is the common thread. Give me some sort of drug that fixes it.
Maybe that's just Dramamine. Maybe that's the experiment that we need to run.
Right. Maybe maybe there's already a drug out there, but that's going to be a thing. I guarantee it. Mark my words. This is being recorded, right? So yeah. All right. So let's move on. So we've established that there are some compelling use cases for VR. Entertainment being the easy go-to, right, for movies, cinematic experiences, and then Was that it?
For heavy tech jobs as well. I mean, when it comes to industrial design, engineering design, computer development, if you think about how most developers sit around with, 17 monitors and they've got, like one turned sideways and then they've, this whole sort of display thing. I can definitely see a strong use case for dropping into a VR development environment where you're capable of setting up things exactly how you want them, exactly what scale you want them. I've got all my my IDEs are all zoomed up now because I'm getting older and my eyes are getting less effective. So those problems go away in VR as well. I can have easy to work with screens set up to exactly however I like them with as wide a field of view as I want and no additional hardware purchases required. And if my one VR helmet could replace 4 4K monitor purchases,
right, that's
an easy sell.
And do you think solutions like different approaches like Magic Leap's sort of light field tech sort of influence? Because with the nice thing about mixed reality, what they're dubbing mixed reality or light field, is that you can actually have a virtual environment. You can have VR and AR anytime, depending on the application and context, right?
Right.
Do you think having the solving for the sense of depth with tricking the brain with light field tech, do you think that's compelling? Do you think ultimately,
I've seen the demo videos and I've tracked Magic Leap's development for a long time. Full disclosure, I'm a Magic Leap fanboy. Super impressed by the specific execution of their development. That sense of realness that comes with their technology, it is literally every sci-fi nerd's dream. The sense of, short of AI like Jarvis, fake holograms that look real is that next best thing.
Right.
And the way that their software works and how it determines and how it really gives a very real sense of, like, the best way to see Magic Leap's technology in action is to see it in a space where there are real life things in front of the projection.
Right.
Because that sense of depth is so pervasive, it does trick your eyes. It seems totally legit.
Is this something that you would wear around every day? And
all the time, every day, unquestionably.
So then it's going to be a see-through device.
Yes.
Okay. And if it's going to be a see-through device, doesn't, that big round blob in the sky, the sun, isn't that going to cause us issues with glare? And if they're solving for that as well, do you know?
Well, no, part of what they're doing is, what is it? I think it's the iPad Pro that has that environmental ambient light adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so that it takes into account what the natural light is, and it changes the projection so that it matches that. It's in the same color spectrum. It's not competing. I fully expect that a consumer level product from Magic Leap would have those same levels of abilities and being able to adjust around those kinds of things. Because we don't have to. It's not like projecting lasers out into a 3D space, right?
Right.
It's projecting directly onto our retinas. So ambient sunlight isn't really that much of a problem as long as you've properly filtered for the back amount of light that's coming in, and as long as you're in the same sort of chroma structure.
Right. Okay, so there are quite a few players right now that are kicking ass. I know you're a Magic Leap fanboy. I happen to be a Google and Apple fanboy. Yes, you can be both. Their MetaVision in the space. Microsoft has already blown our minds. Just recently, they had a George Takei sort of actiongram. So you're a developer and you have one of the devices, you can actually have George Takei just sort of brightening up your day, just walking past your couch and just making you laugh all day. I mean, these are just they're talking about hollow porting. The ability to have a quote unquote Skype call or a virtual call, phone call, and where you actually see the person in almost as if you're talking to Princess Leia and they're in front of you, only with better graphics. And of course, there are other players too. We don't know what Google's going to do with Glass, what the next version really is like. I know they have an enterprise version, and I'm not talking about that. So what do you think? Do you think these guys are just going to kill it do you think the guys that are in the VR space, like Oculus, Vive, those guys are so much ahead because they've solved for, they're solving for some of the problems with VR, and then just toggling on AR becomes sort of the natural next step where they leapfrog the Magic Leaps of the world? Or whether just a sleeping giant like a Facebook, with the social aspects of VR and AR sort of comes in, or just some no-name startup from, Timbuktu comes in and just disrupts everything. Where do you think we're going?
So I think that it's important to remember that all of these little names that are out there, like Magic Leap and Oculus, are all backed by monster giant companies like Facebook and Google. And I would be really, really, really surprised if we don't see a VR Facebook in the future that's Oculus powered. And if we don't see that Google's next realm or next jump into wearables, I fully expect it to use Magic Leap technology.
Wow.
It's all built on the same Unity SDK. There's already a standardized approach to it. Those things are all there. And from my experience, and I've worked with a few startups along the way, especially we've played with some hardware stuff. It's very, very, very difficult to be a brand new startup and bring a hardware product to market. Lots and lots and lots of Kickstarters prove this every day by failing with lots of money.
All right. However, lots of regular users' money. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That being said, we're talking about opening up whole new app markets. And so every company out there that has an IP, every new foursome of dudes who just graduated from college and want to do a little something, this is a whole new world. And it hasn't been touched. There's literally nothing out there in comparison to, you've got Apple and Google's app markets that have millions of apps in total. And then you look at what's available for, say, Cardboard, for instance, and you've got a couple of dozen virtual experiences,
Right.
We've got, everything that's been done before, all that is old is new again. Because we're going to have a Star Wars game and a Star Trek game and a World of Warcraft in VR. And,
Second Life is going to become Third Life.
Exactly.
Or Second Life.
Think of. So I think there's going to be essentially an arms race in the app markets in those spaces as these devices become mainstream. And that's really going to be the biggest consumer driver, when you've got HoloLens across the enterprise. So the parents all kind of have a feel for what this means, to have these kinds of devices. And then you have some lower price. It's, in my mind, if you take an AR or mixed reality device that can act as a peripheral to a gaming PC, you're going to sell 10,000 of them in a weekend. Very, very first weekend comes out. Because when it comes to people who are willing to spend experimental money on high-performance gaming, it's all those high-end PC gamers,
So we haven't mentioned, this is very good, we haven't mentioned PlayStation or Sony yet, right? And they already have a VR entrant in the space. And to date, I should qualify and say that a lot of the VR experiences on the PlayStation 4 is more additive. It's not a full... maybe one or two are full experiences.
Right.
But they're not like full on experiences. I'm not playing an entire game of Call of Duty on there, So that could be the sleeping giant that we don't know about. What do you think? Which market? So we've talked mostly as far as applications are concerned, both in the VR and the AR space, in the consumer market, right? Like in the consumer market, AR. I think I mentioned before. Pokemon will kind of classify as augmented reality if you have the AR mode on. Snapchat is like doing gangbusters where you basically put sometimes offensive filters on your face. Because we all blackface is not offensive at all, but you can do that with Snapchat apparently. But anyway, so like in the consumer space, both in VR and AR, that's completely heavily dominated. In the enterprise space, oil and gas, logistics, field services, you name it, those guys are the ones actually using Google Glass, Vuzix, Recon today.
Right.
So in your view, which medium has mass market implications, AR or VR, and why?
I think AR has way more. I mean, I think that we may see some initial uptake on VR a little bit more, but I think when all the dust settles, when we look at 5 to 7 years in the future, AR is going to have a significantly greater market space. I just think it's going to take the same route that PCs did. Right. Apple's were the first home computers, right? But they were few and far between and kind of high end. Everyone used PCs in the workplace when they started using, WordPerfect and all these normal things. And so they were normalized day to day in business for everyday users. And I think that as the enterprise deployment of AR type devices, like HoloLens in particular, start getting out there, and especially HoloLens 2 and HoloLens 3 and the versions as they continue to come out, I think it's going to normalize those devices in such a way that your average working adult, having used one at work, is going to want one at home for all the same things they use it at work for. Exactly the same way that we do with our phones, messaging, email, a little bit of web surfing, casual usage, all in this one little thing,
Right. And so which specific markets, if AR is going to dominate, which specific markets do you think AR will dominate? Consumer, enterprise, both? When?
I mean, that's where I think that we get that deep dive across the board, consumer and enterprise. I think that VR is still it's too specialty use. And when you're using VR, you're essentially locked into one place. You can't go anywhere with it.
Right.
So it's the device that you have sitting at home, and you go on and you put it on when you get home so that you can go do the big gaming run with your guild, or so that you can watch the new video, or, I mean,
why not both though?
Huge application here.
Why can't there be sort of cross-platform experiences where, regardless, and with my Magic Leap glasses, when I'm at work, I have the VR experience because I'm jacked in, and all my globally distributed coworkers are right next to me virtually, and then once I untether and start walking around, I'm in AR mode. Like, couldn't you see something like that?
I mean, potentially, but the only thing is that, to get a fully immersive VR experience out of something like Magic Leap or HoloLens, for that matter, you're going to have a secondary accessory to kind of put over and close that space in.
Right. That's what I'm saying. When I say jack in, the concept that I was sort of thinking up is you have these kind of like a docking station for your glasses, right, or for your head. So you basically put on your glasses, you're in AR mode, and you're doing something with light or true AR, depending on how quick the technology progresses. And then when you do sit down at home in your gaming pod, or you sit down at work at the conference table chair pod thingy, I'm a bupper, you would then literally jack in to an entire immersive experience with the same peripheral that was around your eyes, right? So the Geordie LaForge thing will have a helmet over it like Spaceballs.
I mean, I can totally see that. It just depends on if they're willing to do that, There's probably going to be a lot of people who, there's probably going to be a lot of companies who are going to focus on one specific market because it's going to be easier for them to put out that way, Right. Having something that's capable of shifting between modes is a higher level of engineering, and it's going to be a higher cost, higher barrier to entry to the marketplace.
All right. One last question before we wrap up. When do you think I can walk around with my cool Ray-Ban looking things with all this capability we've talked about today?
I would like to be more optimistic, but technology never moves as fast as I would like it to. I think we're probably still a good solid 2 to 3 years out before we see even the first round of really great consumer level devices in that space.
Cool. Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate you coming on the show. You're welcome if you want to talk about any of the other categories of things that we geek on about on here. So thank you. I really enjoyed this talk. We could probably go on for another hour because we haven't even scratched the surface of what we really wanted to talk about. So thanks again.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone. This is Noble again, Lost Explorer Tech Talks. We're still experimenting on this thing. This is season 0. I don't know what episode this is going to be, but this is what we're doing. This is the question we have for today's episode: VR versus AR, which has more implications in the mass market, or which is going to actually just eat the world. And we've had a really good talk today, and I'm pretty sure you have your thoughts as well. So, when you see this posted in the mediums of the world, or Twitter, or Google Plus, LinkedIn, where have you, contribute to the conversation. Let us know what you think. This has been another episode of the Lost Explorer Tech Talk. And it has been an honor to talk to Chris Jenkins, CTO at Symphony Agency. And Chris, are there any URLs or Twitter handles or anything you'd like to promote before we
SymphonyAgency.com. Check that out.
Awesome. Right there in Florida. What part of Florida?
Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay. And what you guys do?
We write code and we build marketing platforms.
You kick ass and chew bubblegum, and you're all out of bubblegum, and I get it. Thanks so much, Chris. Everyone, be nice and don't suck.